My name is Robert Chen, and I'm 62 years old now. This story takes me back 5 years to a conversation that changed everything between my father and me. Sometimes the truest words we speak come from a place of quiet exhaustion rather than anger. It was a humid August afternoon when I sat across from my father, William, in his study. The room smelled of old leather and pipe tobacco just as it always had. Dad was 78 then, with silver hair neatly combed back and those sharp blue eyes that could still make me feel like a schoolboy caught without his homework. My sister Margaret sat beside him on the burgundy love seat, looking polished and confident as always. At 59, she had that ageless quality some women possess, where you couldn't quite pin down if they were holding back time, or had simply made peace with it. Her auburn hair was styled perfectly, and her cream-colored blazer probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I had driven 3 hours to have this conversation. My wife Helen told me not to go. She said some things were better left alone. But I needed to say what had been building inside me for 40 years. Dad leaned back in his chair with that familiar, satisfied smile. He had just finished telling me about Margaret's latest accomplishment. She had been promoted to senior vice president at her investment firm, the corner office with the city view, the salary that made my teacher's pension look like pocket change. "Your sister earned everything on her own, unlike you," Dad said. He wasn't being cruel exactly. That was just how he saw the world. Black and white, success and failure, independence and dependency. The words hung in the air between us. I watched dust particles float through the shaft of afternoon sunlight coming through the window. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower hummed its steady drone. I leaned back in my chair and looked at him for a long moment. Then I said what I had come to say. "Then I'll stop sending you money. Now it's her problem." Dad's face went blank. Margaret shifted uncomfortably on the love seat. "What money?" Dad asked. I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it, just decades of quiet truth finally demanding to be spoken. "The money I've been sending you every month for the past 12 years, Dad. The $1,500 that shows up in your account on the first of every month. The money that pays for your medications and your property taxes, and the home health aide who comes twice a week." The color drained from his face. Margaret was staring at me now, really looking at me, maybe for the first time in years. "That's not possible," Dad said, but his voice had lost its certainty. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I handed it to him. He fumbled for his reading glasses and peered at the screen. 12 years of transactions. Every single month, never late, never missed. "You told me it was from your pension," he said quietly. "I never told you where it came from. You assumed it was from your pension. I let you assume that because you needed help, and I knew you'd never accept it if you knew it came from me." Margaret was looking down at her hands now. Her perfect manicured nails, suddenly the most interesting thing in the room. "Let me take you back to understand how we got here. I need you to know the full story. I was born in 1963 to William and Dorothy Chen. Dad worked as a regional manager for an auto parts company. Mom stayed home with us kids. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Dad believed in hard work and self-reliance above all else. Margaret came along 3 years after me. From the beginning, she was exceptional. Straight A's in school, captain of the debate team, scholarship to an Ivy League university. Everything she touched turned to gold. I was different. I struggled with reading as a kid. Dyslexia, they called it later, but back then teachers just thought I wasn't trying hard enough. Math came easier to me, but never easy enough for Dad's standards. I liked working with my hands. I liked being outside. I wanted to be a park ranger or maybe teach elementary school. Dad saw this as lack of ambition. Why aim for a modest life when you could reach for greatness? Why be ordinary when you could be extraordinary like Margaret? When I was 18, I told Dad I wanted to go to the state teachers' college. He was disappointed, but he helped me fill out the financial aid forms. I got some grants and loans. I worked 30 hours a week at a grocery store to cover the rest. It took me 5 years to finish a 4-year degree, because I could only manage part-time enrollment while working. Margaret graduated summa cum laude from Princeton and went straight to business school. Dad paid her full tuition. She never had to work during school. She could focus entirely on her studies and her networking and building the foundation for her glittering career. I didn't resent it then. She was brilliant and driven, and Dad was so proud of her. I understood. Some children are meant to soar, and some are meant to walk steady on solid ground. Both have their place. I became an elementary school teacher, 5th grade. I loved it. I loved the kids and their questions and the way their faces lit up when something finally made sense. I met Helen at a teacher's conference. She taught 3rd grade at a school across town. We got married when I was 26 and she was 25. We had 2 kids. Sarah came first, then Daniel 2 years later. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a good school district. We took camping vacations and read books together in the evenings and coached Little League on weekends. It was a beautiful, ordinary life. Margaret married a lawyer named Charles. They had 1 daughter, Emily. They lived in a stunning colonial house with a circular driveway. They took European vacations and sent Emily to private schools. Charles made partner at his firm. Margaret kept climbing the corporate ladder. Their lives looked like something from a magazine spread. Dad talked about Margaret constantly. At family dinners, he would update everyone on her latest promotion, or the article she had written for a business journal, or the award she had received. When people asked about me, he would say, "Robert teaches school," in the same tone you might say Robert rakes leaves or Robert exists somewhere, doing something unremarkable. I told myself it didn't matter. I had Helen and the kids and work I found meaningful. I didn't need Dad's approval. But that's a lie we tell ourselves, isn't it? We always need our parents' approval on some level, no matter how old we get. Mom passed away when I was 38. Heart attack. Quick and unexpected. Dad was devastated. He aged 10 years and 10 months. The light went out of him for a long time. I called him every week. I drove over every other weekend to check on him. I mowed his lawn and fixed his leaky faucets and made sure he was eating properly. Margaret called once a month, usually from her car on the way to some important meeting. "You're closer," she would say. "You have more time. My schedule is insane right now." It was true. I lived an hour away. She lived 4 hours away. My schedule allowed for weekend visits. Hers filled up months in advance with conferences and client dinners and international travel. When I was 45, Dad had his first serious health scare. Diabetes complications. He needed surgery and months of recovery. I took family leave from school. I stayed at his house for 6 weeks helping him through physical therapy and managing his medications and making sure he followed his dietary restrictions. Margaret visited for 2 days. She was very concerned and very apologetic about not being able to stay longer. She had a crucial merger to finalize. She sent an expensive fruit basket and a get well card. It was during his recovery that I learned the truth about Dad's finances. He had always been so private about money, but going through his bills and bank statements, I realized he was in trouble. Mom's medical bills before she died had drained their savings. Dad's pension covered basics but not much more. The house needed repairs he couldn't afford. Property taxes kept climbing. His medications cost more each year, even with Medicare. He was too proud to ask for help. I could see him quietly selling off Mom's jewelry and some of their antiques, making do with less, skipping medications to make them stretch further. I talked to Helen about it. We looked at our budget. The kids were in college then on scholarships and student loans and part-time jobs. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough. Teachers' salaries aren't impressive, but we had always lived below our means. We had some savings. We had room in our monthly budget. "We should help him," Helen said. She didn't hesitate. "That's the kind of woman she is. He won't accept it if he knows it's from me," I told her. "Then we'll be creative," she said. I called Dad and told him I had been reviewing his finances to help him organize things. I told him I discovered he had been underpaid on his pension for years due to a calculation error. I said I had contacted the pension office and they were going to start sending him additional payments to make up for it, $1,500 a month, starting immediately. Dad was relieved and happy. He never questioned it. Why would he? It made sense. Big companies made calculation errors all the time. He deserved that money. He had worked hard his whole life. Every month for 12 years I transferred $1,500 from our account to his. We considered it an investment in his dignity and comfort. We never told anyone. Not the kids. Not Margaret. Especially not Margaret. Dad's quality of life improved. He could afford his medications. He hired a home health aide twice a week. He got the roof repaired and the furnace replaced. He could take Margaret and Charles out to nice dinners when they visited and feel like he was still providing, somehow still the patriarch taking care of his family. And every time I saw him he would mention Margaret's latest success. How proud he was of her independence. How she had never needed anyone's help. How she had built her empire with her own 2 hands. The comparison was always there, unspoken but clear. Margaret was the success. I was the one who had needed help. The one who took the easy path. The one who never quite measured up. I never corrected him. What would be the point? He needed to believe Margaret was entirely self-sufficient. He needed to believe his way of seeing the world was correct. Who was I to take that from him? But over the years it wore on me. The constant praise for Margaret. The dismissal of my life and my work and my choices. The assumption that because I wasn't wealthy I wasn't successful. The belief that because I taught children instead of managing portfolios, I had somehow settled for less than I was capable of. Helen would hold my hand after family dinners and remind me that we knew the truth. Our kids knew the truth. The hundreds of students whose lives I had touched knew the truth. But there's a particular pain in having your father see you as less than you are. In knowing that the person who is supposed to champion you has instead spent decades wishing you were someone else. So when Dad made that comment about Margaret earning everything on her own unlike me, I felt something crack inside. Not anger exactly. Just exhaustion. The exhaustion of holding up someone else's illusion of reality for 12 years while being told you're not enough. The study was completely silent now. Dad was still staring at my phone at the evidence of 12 years of transfers. Margaret was pale. Why didn't you tell me? Dad finally asked. Would you have accepted it if you knew? He didn't answer. We both knew he wouldn't have. I teach school, Dad. I make about $60,000 a year. Helen makes about the same. We have a small pension and modest savings. We've been sending you $18,000 a year for 12 years. That's over $200,000. We did it because you're my father and I love you and you needed help. We did it quietly because we knew you needed to keep your pride. Robert, I didn't know, Margaret said softly. She looked genuinely shaken. I know you didn't. This isn't about you, Maggie. This is about Dad's version of reality versus actual reality. I looked at my father. Really looked at him. He seemed smaller suddenly. Older. The sharp blue eyes were clouded with confusion and something that might have been shame. I've never asked you to be proud of me, Dad. I stopped expecting that a long time ago. But I'm tired of being treated like I'm less than I am. I'm tired of my life being dismissed as if teaching children has no value. I'm tired of being compared to Margaret, as if there's only one way to measure a person's worth. I was proud of you, he said, but it sounded weak even to him. You were embarrassed by me. You saw my choice to teach as settling. You saw my modest house as failure. You saw my decision to prioritize time with my family over climbing a career ladder as lack of ambition. Every conversation we've had for 40 years has been colored by your disappointment that I didn't turn out more like Margaret. Dad set my phone down carefully on the side table. His hands were shaking slightly. I wanted you to have more, he said. I wanted you to have security and success, and a life where you didn't have to worry about money. I don't worry about money, Dad. I have enough. I've always had enough. You know why? Because I didn't need more. I needed a happy marriage and healthy kids and work that meant something. I got all three. By every measure that matters to me, I'm successful. But you never saw it that way. Margaret stood up. She walked over to the window and looked out at the garden Mom had planted 30 years ago. She wrapped her arms around herself even though the room was warm. I've been so focused on my career, she said quietly. I barely have time to call once a month. I see Emily maybe twice a week and we live in the same city. Charles and I are more like business partners than spouses. I make excellent money, but I'm not sure I've made an excellent life. She turned to look at me. There were tears in her eyes. You've been taking care of Dad all these years, coming over every other weekend, managing his health care, sending him money you probably needed for your own retirement. And I've done what exactly? Sent expensive gifts and made excuses and told myself my career was too important to take time away from. Maggie, I started, but she held up her hand. No, let me say this. Dad always held me up as the example, the successful one, the independent one. But what have I been independent from? My family, my responsibilities, the people who actually needed me? You've been here, Robert. You've been present and patient and generous. That's real success. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy chasing the version of success Dad taught us to value. Dad was crying now. Silent tears running down his weathered cheeks. I had never seen my father cry before, not even at Mom's funeral. He was from a generation that believed men didn't show such emotion. I'm sorry, he said. His voice cracked. God, Robert, I'm so sorry. You're right about all of it. I measured everything by money and status, because that's what my father taught me. His approval was tied to achievement. I became what he wanted, and I tried to make you into the same thing. I didn't see what you actually built. He looked at me with devastation in his eyes. You have a marriage that lasted 36 years. Helen still looks at you like you hung the moon. Your kids call you every week because they want to, not because they feel obligated. You shaped hundreds of young lives. And you took care of your old man with such grace that I didn't even realize I was being cared for. That's not settling, Robert. That's mastery of what really matters. I felt my throat tighten. These were words I had waited 40 years to hear. I don't need you to stop sending the money, Dad said. I'll call Margaret. We'll figure something out. You've done more than enough. I'll cover it, Dad, Margaret said immediately. I should have been contributing, all along. I can easily afford $1,500 a month. More if you need it. I'll keep sending half, I said. We can both help. That's what family does. We sat there in that study as the afternoon light shifted and softened. 3 people finally being honest with each other after decades of performing our assigned roles. Dad, the stern patriarch demanding excellence. Margaret, the golden child seeking approval through achievement. Me, the disappointment who had quietly built something real while being told it wasn't enough. Tell me about your students, Dad said after a long silence. Really tell me. I want to know what your work is. So I told him. I told him about Jeremy, who couldn't read in September but was devouring chapter books by May. About Maria, whose parents didn't speak English, and how I stayed after school twice a week to help her with homework. About the school play I directed every year, and how we always chose stories that gave the shy kids and the struggling kids a moment to shine. I told him about the letters I still received from former students. The young woman who became a veterinarian and said my science lessons sparked her passion. The man who became a social worker and credited my kindness during his difficult home situation with showing him a different way to be. The teacher who said she went into education because I made her feel seen and valued. Dad listened, really listened. For the first time in my memory, he wasn't waiting for his turn to talk or mentally comparing my stories to Margaret's accomplishments. He was just present with me in my life as it actually was. That's a hell of a legacy, he said when I finished. A hell of a lot more meaningful than quarterly earnings reports. They're both valuable, Dad, I said. Margaret's work matters too. She helps companies grow. She creates jobs. She's brilliant at what she does. We don't have to diminish one to celebrate the other. You're more gracious than I deserve, he said. Over the following months, things changed between us. Dad called me weekly just to talk. He asked about Helen and the kids by name, remembering details from previous conversations. He asked what I was teaching and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. He started asking Margaret different questions too. Not about her job, but about her life. Was she happy? What did she do for fun? When was the last time she and Charles went on a real vacation? Margaret started visiting more, not constantly, but more than before. She arranged her schedule to see Ohm every 6 weeks or so for a long weekend. She and I would coordinate our visits sometimes so we could both be there. The three of us would sit in Dad's study or on the back porch and talk about real things. Not accomplishments or acquisitions, but feelings and memories and regrets and hopes. Margaret cut back her hours at work. She started having dinner with Emily twice a week instead of twice a month. She and Charles went to marriage counseling and decided they actually liked each other when they bothered to spend time together. She seemed lighter, somehow less driven by the relentless need to achieve and more focused on being present. "You gave me a gift," she told me one afternoon while we were weeding Mom's old garden together. "Dad was napping inside. When you stopped pretending, everything was fine. You freed all of us, to be honest." I didn't mean to blow up the family," I said. "You didn't blow it up, you cleared away the performance. Turns out underneath all our practice roles we actually like each other." Dad lived 3 more years after that conversation. Good years. He was present for Sarah's wedding and Daniel's graduation from veterinary school. He came to my retirement party when I finished 32 years of teaching. He told anyone who would listen that his son had taught over 1,000 children and shaped countless lives, and he was finally smart enough to understand what that meant. Margaret gave the eulogy at his funeral. She talked about how Dad taught her to strive for excellence, but Robert taught her to strive for meaning. She said Dad gave her the tools for success, but Robert gave her the example of a life well lived. I think Dad would have appreciated that. By the end, he understood that he had 2 successful children, just in very different ways. He learned that wealth comes in many forms, and the kind that compounds in human connection and RPOs might be the most valuable of all. I'm retired now. Helen and I volunteer at the library and travel when we can and spend time with our grandchildren. Margaret is semi-retired too. She consults part-time and spends the rest of her time painting, which it turns out she's quite good at. We have dinner together monthly now, the 3 families. We tell stories and laugh and occasionally argue about politics or the best way to make Mom's pot roast. It's not perfect, but it's honest. And honest is better than perfect any day. I learned something important from that afternoon in Dad's study. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop enabling someone else's illusion, even when maintaining it seems easier. The truth might be uncomfortable, but it creates the possibility for real connection. And real connection is what we're all searching for underneath our careers and accomplishments and carefully constructed images. Dad didn't leave me any money when he died. He didn't need to. He left me something better. 3 years of truly being seen by him. 3 years of conversations where I wasn't compared to Margaret or found wanting. 3 years of knowing he finally understood the value of the life I built. That was worth more than any inheritance. That was worth every dollar I sent him over 12 years. That was worth the 40 years of patience it took to get there. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not going into a more lucrative field. If I wish I had followed Margaret's path and built wealth and status. The answer is simple: no. Not for a single moment. I built something better. I built a life I'm proud of with people I love doing work that mattered. I built steadiness and presence and reliability. I built a marriage that deepened over time instead of fracturing under pressure. I raised kids who became adults I genuinely enjoy spending time with. And in the end, I help Ed, my father, see that there are many ways to live a good life. That success isn't measured solely by bank accounts and titles. That the quiet work of teaching and caring and showing up matters just as much as the visible work of achieving and acquiring. That might be the most important lesson I ever taught. And the fact that my father finally learned it before he died means I succeeded at the thing that mattered most. We all want to be seen by our parents. Really seen for who we are, not who they wanted us to be. It took 60 years, but I finally got that. It was worth the wait. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own family journey, I would love it if you would like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about family, resilience, and the quiet wisdom that comes with age. And please leave a comment below telling me about a time when honesty changed a relationship in your life. I read every single one, and your stories inspire me to keep sharing mine. Thank you for listening.